A young, spoiled, and arrogant billionaire flung an impressive, purebred German shepherd into the ocean, in a region where great white sharks were known to gather. The dog, bound and desperate, fought to stay afloat as the predators closed in, drawn by his frantic movements. Alone, exhausted, and surrounded by the hungry sharks, the dog closed his eyes, ready to accept his fate. But as the creatures moved in for the kill, something unexpected happened. Something that would change everything. If you, like us, love animals, you won't want to miss this emotional story. The morning sun blazed through the immense windows of the Mendonça mansion, creating a spectacle of light that Bruno ignored as he sat slumped in his Italian leather armchair. The 21-year-old stared out over the sprawling gardens with a vacant gaze, idly swirling a crystal glass in his hands. Neither the expensive liquor nor anything else around him brought him satisfaction. His father's namesake, Bruno, called for Camilla, the housekeeper who had been with him since childhood. "Your parents are on the line," she said, her voice a familiar blend of affection and concern, cultivated over years together. "They called to say they won't be able to make it back for your birthday party next week." On the phone, his mother Marina's voice was robotic as she described an incredible business opportunity in Asia, while Eduardo Mendonça's deep voice dominated the call. "You know we do everything for your future. We've deposited more money into your account so you can celebrate however you like." Bruno muttered, "They really think they can buy everything with money?" Standing abruptly, he ordered, "Camilla, get the car ready. I'm going out." Soon his friend Lucas was exclaiming, raising a champagne flute. "I thought you'd already given up. After all, my new dog took first place in the qualifying trials. First place, of course." The group followed Bruno to the kennel's sales division, where the most valuable dogs were kept. It was there he saw him. Rex, a magnificent German shepherd with a sleek black coat and a small white patch on his chest. The animal had an imposing stature, and his eyes shone with a peculiar intelligence. As Bruno signed the papers for the most expensive purchase he had ever made, he imagined the headlines. "Mendonça heir acquires the country's most valuable dog." He would finally the center of attention. What Bruno failed to notice, however, was Rex's gaze. Accustomed to experienced handlers and dedicated care, the dog observed him with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Something in his gut told him that this young man saw not a living being, but a trophy for an agility competition next month. Without even glancing at the dog, Bruno ordered the handler, "I want all eyes on me when Rex wins his first trial under my command that night." While Rex adjusted to the new kennel, Bruno partied with his friends, already plotting his rise to the top of high society. What he didn't know was that his obsession with recognition would lead him down a very different path. A path that would transform not only his life but the lives of everyone around him. Camila, watching her impulsive employer from a distance, said a silent prayer. She knew that determined look in Bruno's eyes, the same one that always preceded his greatest follies, and something told her that this time, the consequences would be far more severe than any previous whim. In the weeks following Rex's purchase, the dog's routine was turned upside down. Accustomed to the meticulous care and specialized training of his former owners, the animal now faced negligent attention disguised as diligence. Diego, the kennel's most experienced handler, watched Bruno's impulsive decisions with growing concern. "Sir, Rex needs an adjustment period before we start intensive training," he argued whenever he could. "He's still getting used to the new environment and the different diet." "I don't care," Bruno retorted, his eyes fixed on his phone. "The competition is in 3 weeks, and he needs to be at his best. double the training regimen. This isn't right, Diego murmured to himself, noticing how Rex's neck flinched at his touch with a low whimper, almost a lament. I know it's hard, old friend. I know. Diego, my man, Bruno exclaimed, already visibly intoxicated by alcohol. Come join us. He was just telling the others how Rex was going to dominate the race next weekend. Don't give me excuses, Bruno snapped, his smile vanishing instantly. I paid a fortune for this dog. He has to be in shape. The group's laughter echoed through the club, making Diego clench his hands on his cap. Mr. Bruno, please listen to me. If we keep this up, Rex could have serious problems. The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. After 30 years dedicated to the kennel's dogs, Diego felt tears welling in his eyes. As you wish, sir. I only ask that you think of Rex's well-being. Shortly after, as the group dispersed, Camilla approached Bruno. Don't you think you were too hard on Diego? He always took such good care of the dogs. That night, before leaving the kennel for the last time, Diego went to Rex's stall. Recognizing the handler's footsteps, the dog approached the gate. Diego whispered, I'm sorry, my friend, offering the animal a sugar cube. I wish I could do more for you. Rex accepted the treat gently, his large, expressive eyes fixed on the face of the man who had cared for him since his arrival. Diego noticed that Rex had lost even more weight and that his paws showed signs of wear from the excessive training. With one last look at the dog, Diego left, carrying only a backpack with his belongings and the heavy weight of concern for the animal's fate as he walked down the dirt road leading away from the kennel. He was certain that something terrible was about to happen. The day of the competition dawned under a sky heavy with gray clouds, as if nature itself sensed what was to come. The municipal stadium was packed, with the city's elite occupying luxurious boxes, champagne glasses clinking, and animated conversations filling the air. Bruno circulated among the guests with a forced smile, trying to mask his anxiety with generous doses of alcohol. Rex is going to show everyone what he's made of, he repeated to anyone who would listen, though his voice was beginning to waver. Camilla watched from a distance, her heart heavy since Diego's dismissal. Rex had been subjected to an even more rigorous training regimen under a new handler who dared not defy Bruno's orders. The result was evident. The once imposing dog now showed clear signs of exhaustion. In the kennels, Rex was restless. His eyes, once bright, were now dull, and his coat had lost its luster. The new handler tried to prepare him for the competition, but the animal kept shifting, as if trying to communicate his discomfort. Mr. Bruno, the handler began hesitantly, perhaps we should consider withdrawing Rex from the race. He doesn't seem well. A sharp comment from Camilla, who was following Bruno, made him flinch. Please, Bruno, listen to them. Look at Rex. He's clearly not in any condition to race. Rex was positioned at the starting gate, his legs visibly trembling, while other well-cared-for dogs waited for the race to begin, a painful contrast to Rex's state. When the signal was given and the gates flew open, Rex, driven by years of training, shot forward with the others. But it soon became clear that something was wrong. His movements, normally fluid and graceful, were uncoordinated and heavy. Mid-course, as the other dogs pulled away, Rex began to lose speed dramatically, his legs trembling more intensely, his breathing becoming ragged. The crowd watched in tense silence as the dog struggled to continue. Less than 200 meters from the finish line, Rex staggered. His legs, exhausted from overtraining and poor nutrition, finally gave way. The dog collapsed heavily onto the track, raising a cloud of dust. Shouts of horror echoed through the stadium, and the race was immediately stopped. The veterinary team rushed to the scene while Bruno, watching from the VIP box, felt the world spin, not just from the alcohol, but from the humiliation unfolding before his eyes. Laughter and malicious comments spread through the stadium. Lucas, who moments before had been toasting alongside Bruno, now quietly distanced himself, as if not wanting to be associated with the failure. "This animal needs intensive care immediately," the head veterinarian declared, casting a severe glare at Bruno. "What did you do to him? He's completely exhausted and malnourished." Just then, the rain began to fall, first in scattered drops, then in a violent downpour, as if the sky itself wept for Rex's suffering. Bruno remained paralyzed in the box, his face a mask of fury and humiliation, as he watched his reputation, along with his dreams of glory, crumble. What no one knew was that this moment of defeat was only the beginning. A plan was already forming in Bruno's mind. A plan born of rage, wounded pride, and alcohol. A plan that would change the fate of everyone involved. That night, after the race, a nightmare descended upon the club. Bruno locked himself in his penthouse suite, surrounded by empty bottles and unanswered messages on his phone. Social media was exploding with videos of Rex's collapse, accompanied by merciless comments. "Shut up!" Bruno's drunken voice thundered from the room. "I don't want to hear about that useless dog. He humiliated me in front of the whole city." Around 11 o'clock, as the storm still battered the region, Bruno finally emerged from the room, his eyes red and unfocused. He staggered, muttering, "Where's my phone? I need to make a call." Lucas was on the other end. "Bring your father's yacht to the private pier," Bruno said. His voice had become strangely calm. "Yes, I know it's raining, but I don't care. Bring the others too. We're going to have a farewell party." With an empty smile, Bruno ordered, "Rex wants water. Give him some water. Untie him from there." Terrified staff began to drag Rex from his stall. The dog, still weak after the competition, tried to resist, his eyes wide with fear as the rain turned the ground to mud. At the club's private pier, Lucas waited with the luxury yacht, an imposing vessel typically used for high society parties. The storm made the boat rock violently, but that didn't seem to bother the group of drunk youths already on board. "Start the engines," Bruno commanded, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "What, are you scared?" Camilla came running down the pier, completely soaked. "Don't do this! Think about what your parents would say!" she screamed. But she didn't know that, at that very moment, a small fishing boat was approaching the port. Its owner, a simple man named Gabriel, was about to become Rex's only hope. Gabriel, who had never minded bad weather in his 40 years as a fisherman, knew that the best catches happened on the stormiest nights. Yet, something troubled him. The sea was rougher than usual, and a strange feeling tightened in his chest. "Time to head back, old girl," he murmured, adjusting the tiller of his small wooden boat, which had been his livelihood for decades. Though not large, it had supported his family for generations, and had never failed them. It was then, over the roar of the storm and the crashing waves, that Gabriel heard a sound that didn't belong, the desperate howl of a dog. At first, he thought his ears were deceiving him, but then the sound came again, stronger, pulling his boat toward the distant lights. As he drew closer, Gabriel began to hear voices, shouts and laughter from young people mixed with loud music, a sound utterly out of place in the middle of the tempest. As he got closer, the scene that unfolded made him catch his breath. On the deck of the yacht, illuminated by powerful spotlights, A group of clearly intoxicated youths surrounded something, or rather, someone. A dog, tied up and terrified, trying to keep its footing on the wet deck as the boat pitched violently. Gabriel recognized the voice. It was Bruno Mendonça, son of the businessman Eduardo Mendonça, whose face often appeared in local papers and on social media at parties and high society events. On the yacht, Bruno staggered dangerously close to the dog, screaming, "Do you have any idea how much you cost me?" he yelled, pointing at the panicked animal. "You destroyed my reputation today." One of his friends tried to intervene. "I think we've gone too far. We should go back." But his voice was lost to the storm and the music. Bruno stood beside Rex, his face twisted with hatred and vengeance. With a violent shove, he forced the dog toward the yacht's edge. The animal, still bound and unable to defend himself, lost his footing on the slick deck. The sound of his body hitting the water echoed in the night like a gunshot. Rex fought against the waves, but the ropes binding him made swimming nearly impossible. The dark water enveloped him, pulling him under and spitting him back to the surface, each movement a silent scream for help. Time seemed to stand still as Gabriel maneuvered his small boat toward the dog. The rain continued to pour, drastically reducing visibility. Rex struggled against the waves, his movements becoming desperate and uncoordinated, hampered by the ropes that still tied him to the yacht. The atmosphere had shattered. Laughter gave way to a tense silence, broken only by the raging storm and the anguished howls of Rex. Some of the youths, who moments before had been reveling, now stared in shock, as if waking from a trance to the grim reality of what they had allowed. But Bruno remained still, a twisted smile on his face as he watched Rex struggle in the churning water. "He's getting what he deserves," he muttered, a cruelty in his voice that made Lucas flinch. Gabriel knew there was no time for arguments, no time to appeal to their conscience. Rex needed help now. With the precise movements of a man who had spent a lifetime at sea, Gabriel maneuvered his small fishing boat as close as he dared. Even in his panic, Rex showed a surprising intelligence, stretching to nudge the lifebuoy with his muzzle. Gabriel began to pull the rope, slowly, steadily, drawing the exhausted dog closer. From the deck of the yacht, a few yards away, came a chaos of mixed shouts. Some cried for help, others demanded they leave immediately. Bruno said nothing, watching the scene unfold like a private spectacle. "Come on, old friend," Gabriel whispered to his boat, as he often did in difficult moments. "Don't fail me now." Rex, utterly spent, clung to the buoy, as if he understood. It was his only chance. His large, expressive eyes were fixed on Gabriel, a heart-wrenching mix of terror and trust. But the yacht was already a ghost, disappearing into the darkness, taking Bruno and his friends with it. Gabriel knew this couldn't be the end. Someone had to answer for such cruelty. "Bruno Mendonça!" Camilla screamed, spotting a lone figure on the pier. "Get help!" With the help of several strong men, Rex was finally lifted from the water and brought to solid ground. His body trembled violently from cold and exhaustion, and the ropes had cut deep into his legs. Gabriel looked at Camilla, who simply nodded, tears streaming down her face. "It was Bruno Mendonça," the fisherman said, his voice firm, "and I'll make sure he answers for this." As the first rays of sun broke the horizon, Gabriel stayed by Rex's side while he received first aid. The old fisherman knew that night would change many lives. His, the dog's, and most certainly, Bruno Mendonça's. But a quiet feeling in his gut told him the story was far from over. The news spread through the city like wildfire. Local papers spoke of nothing else. The Mendonça heir who tried to drown a German shepherd in an act of staggering cruelty. Social media exploded with videos, filmed by Bruno's own friends, that clearly showed his face, his actions, his cold indifference. Eduardo Mendonça was in an important meeting in Singapore when Camila's call came through. The businessman, known for his unshakable composure, nearly collapsed as he listened to what his son had done. Rex had been taken to the best veterinary clinic in the region. There, Dr. Carvalho, a specialist, worked through the night, treating not only the dog's physical wounds, but his visible trauma. Gabriel shook his head, his humility a stark contrast to the night's events. "I only did what any decent person would have," he said. "The real hero is him." He pointed to Rex, resting in a specially prepared kennel. "I've never seen such a will to live." Meanwhile, Bruno was locked in his room. Sober now, he was beginning to understand the magnitude of his actions. His friends had vanished, their phones went unanswered, and social media was a torrent of relentless hate. Then, his phone rang. It was his father's assistant. The private jet was on its way back from Singapore. A chill ran down Bruno's spine. In all his years of reckless behavior, his father had never once cut a business trip short. For the very first time, Bruno felt a true, paralyzing fear of consequence. At the vet clinic, a small crowd had formed. People brought gifts for Rex, leaving cards and messages of support. Among them was Diego, the dog's former handler, who had rushed over as soon as he heard. He sighed, stroking Rex's neck through the bars of the kennel. "The important thing is that he's alive," Diego said, "and that maybe, finally, some people will learn that money doesn't give you the right to abuse another living being." When Eduardo arrived, his voice was controlled, but laced with a quiet fury. "Where is Bruno?" His son was sitting on his bed, looking smaller and younger than his 21 years. When he lifted his gaze to meet his father's, something inside him finally broke. "I don't want to hear your excuses," Eduardo said, his voice trembling with rage. "For years, I ignored your behavior, the parties, the spending. I thought I was protecting you, giving you time to mature. But last night, you crossed a line. You didn't just harm an animal. You shamed our name. You shamed me. What's going to happen?" Bruno's voice was barely a whisper. At the clinic, Rex finally slept peacefully, watched over by Gabriel and Diego. The old fisherman and the experienced handler had formed a silent alliance, determined to ensure the dog would never again suffer at the hands of those who saw him as an object. They didn't know it yet, but that day marked the beginning of a profound change, not just for Bruno, but for all of them. A change that would prove that sometimes you must lose everything to find what truly matters. The first week after the incident transformed Bruno's world. Determined to teach his son a lesson he would never forget, Eduardo took drastic measures. He froze Bruno's bank accounts, leaving him with a single debit card with a strict daily limit. He revoked his club memberships, confiscated his luxury cars, and, most importantly, decreed that Bruno would work at the family's kennel, not as an owner, but as an employee. "You're starting from zero," Eduardo declared over breakfast, as Bruno stared in disbelief at the employee ID badge on the table. "And when I say zero, I mean it. You will clean the pens, you will haul bags of feed, you will learn every single detail of what it takes to care for these animals." The news was a thunderclap. Diego, the handler Bruno had unjustly fired, was now his boss. Bruno's face burned with shame as he remembered how he had treated the man at the clinic. While Rex continued his recovery, now under the joint care of Dr. Carvalho and Gabriel, the old fisherman spent hours with the dog, telling him stories of the sea and watching with satisfaction at every small sign of progress. "He's responding very well," Dr. Carvalho remarked, "but the psychological trauma will take much longer to heal." Bruno's first day on the job was a trial of humiliation and revelation. Dressed in a simple jumpsuit and rubber boots, he reported to Diego at 5 in the morning. The hours that followed were a test of physical and emotional endurance. He discovered muscles he never knew he had, and his soft, manicured hands soon blistered. Days bled into weeks, and slowly, something began to shift in Bruno. The hard labor, which at first felt like an unbearable punishment, began to give him a strange sense of purpose. For the first time, he was learning something real. Diego, watching closely, noticed the change. The arrogant young man who used to bark orders now asked questions, listened, and tried to understand. One cold morning, Diego found him arriving early, helping to prepare the morning feed. Bruno paused, looking at his calloused hands. "You know," he said, "the hardest part isn't the work. It's looking into the eyes of these dogs every day and remembering what I did to Rex. How could I have been so cruel?" Meanwhile, Rex, too, was healing. His physical wounds had nearly vanished, and flickers of his old confidence were returning. It was during one of their quiet afternoons together that Eduardo appeared at the clinic. The businessman, who had been monitoring both the dog's recovery and his son's gradual transformation from a distance, had a proposal. Gabriel listened intently as Eduardo explained his audacious plan. A plan that could change not only Rex's future, but Bruno's as well. Gabriel looked at Rex, then out at the horizon where the sun was setting. A decision had to be made, a true first step toward redemption. "I want to convert part of this kennel into a rehabilitation center for abused dogs," Eduardo explained, his eyes alight with a renewed energy. "A place where traumatized animals like Rex can heal and find new homes. And I want you to help me make it a reality." "Sir, you want me," Gabriel began, but Eduardo gently cut him off. "I want your wisdom, Gabriel, your compassion." Dr. Carvalho smiled. "It's an excellent idea, but what about Bruno? How does he fit into this?" That same morning, Bruno was going through his routine at the kennel with a surprising dedication. As he was feeding the dogs, Camilla approached, her expression serious. "Your father wants to see you." Bruno's stomach tightened. He walked into the office to find not only his father, but also Gabriel, Diego, and Dr. Carvalho. He listened in silence as his father laid out the project for the rehabilitation center. With tears in his eyes, Bruno finally spoke. "I want to be a part of it. I want to try." Diego met his gaze, his expression unreadable. "Your redemption begins when you earn back Rex's trust. Only then will you have proven you've truly changed." Bruno looked out the window at the dogs in the yard. He used to see them as status symbols. Now, after weeks of caring for them, he was beginning to see their nobility, their sensitivity, their capacity for forgiveness. Gabriel smiled. "Then let's begin tomorrow. Rex will be transferred here, and you will be the one to receive him. Not as his owner, but as someone willing to learn how to be better." Walking out of the office, Bruno felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps it was never too late to change. The morning of the transfer was clear and cool. Bruno had arrived at the kennel before dawn, his heart pounding. He spent hours preparing a special enclosure, following Diego's instructions to make it a calm and welcoming space. When the transport vehicle arrived, the air grew still. Gabriel was the first to step out, followed by Dr. Carvalho. Rex was led carefully down the ramp. His steps were still hesitant, but far steadier than before. He explored the new surroundings with a quiet curiosity, his ears swiveling to catch every sound. Then his eyes found Bruno. Rex froze. The moment stretched, silent and heavy. Bruno fought to keep his hands from shaking. Rex just stared as if trying to understand the change he sensed in the young man before him. There was no fear in his eyes, only an intense watchfulness. "This is incredible," Dr. Carvalho whispered. "He's approaching on his own." And then something no one expected happened. Rex walked forward purposefully until he was less than a yard from Bruno. He lowered his magnificent head and, to everyone's astonishment, gently nudged the young man's hand with his wet nose. Bruno stood frozen, barely daring to breathe. Rex stayed close, his touch a silent question, a rediscovery. Feeling a resolve he had never known, Bruno whispered, "I will do whatever it takes." Camila, watching from a distance, murmured, "It's as if he knows you've changed." Eduardo, seeing this, finally saw the man he hoped his son could become. Gabriel smiled, his eyes full of wisdom. "I think they are both ready. Rex to help other dogs, and Bruno to help other people." Months later, the Mendonça Canine Rehabilitation Center held its grand opening. "I can't believe this all started with such a cruel act," Camilla said, arranging chairs. "It's like the universe turned something terrible into something beautiful." With Rex at his side, now fully recovered, walking with a serene elegance, Bruno stepped up to the podium. He looked out at the crowd, at the faces of those who had once despised him. He took a deep breath. "A few months ago," he began, "I was a different person. Someone who believed that money and status were everything. Someone who saw animals as objects. It took me making the worst mistake of my life to learn the true value of a life." His voice cracked with emotion. "I almost lost my own humanity in order to find it. And I owe that to so many people. To my father, who had the courage to guide me. To Camila, who never gave up on me. To Diego, who taught me the true meaning of care. And especially to Gabriel, a humble fisherman who risked his life to save Rex, and in doing so saved me too." Silent tears streamed down Camilla's face as she struggled to contain her emotion. Gabriel, with his characteristic humility, simply smiled and rested a hand on Rex's neck. "This center isn't just a place to mend injured dogs," Bruno continued. "It's a space for transformation. Every animal that comes here will have the same chance Rex had. To trust, to heal, and to start over. And every person who works here will have the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to become better." When Bruno finished his speech, the silence was broken by heartfelt applause. Rex, as if understanding the gravity of the moment, let out a soft howl, making everyone smile. "His name is Rex," Diego informed them, reading from the rescue file. "Curious, isn't it?" "Incredible, truly," murmured Dr. Carvalho, watching how Rex seemed to know exactly what he was feeling, as if wanting to show that hope still existed. "You know what's most special?" Gabriel said, placing a hand on Bruno's shoulder. "Now Rex is no longer just a survivor. He has become a healer." "Yes," Bruno replied, his eyes filled with a hard-won wisdom. "And what a beautiful beginning we have here." On one particularly hectic morning, Camilla rushed into the office where Bruno was reviewing follow-up reports. "Bruno, you have to see this," she said, breathless. On the screen, a live news report showed Ricardo being led away by the police with the headline, "Santos heir arrested for organizing clandestine dogfights." Bruno sank heavily into his chair, feeling the weight of memories. That could have been him. That almost was him. He looked at Gabriel, then at Diego, and finally at Camilla. No one needed to say a word. They all understood what had to be done. Gabriel, however, kept his eyes on Bruno. "You know what this means, don't you?" he said. "You're going to have to face your past again." The rescue operation was organized in record time. 3 hours later, a caravan of specially equipped trailers departed from the center, heading for Ricardo's property. Bruno insisted on going despite everyone's concerns. What they found there was devastating. The dogs were in deplorable conditions, many with clear signs of abuse and poorly treated injuries. Seeing it made Bruno relive his own cruelty from months ago, but now, with a completely different perspective. The rescue effort lasted the entire day. Each animal had to be assessed, stabilized, and prepared for transport. "He knows," Gabriel commented, observing the behavior of one of the dogs. "He knows exactly what they're going through." "Hey, friend," Bruno whispered, slowly approaching a frightened dog. "I know you have no reason to trust humans right now. I wouldn't either. But I promise you, here, it will be different." "Incredible, isn't it?" said Eduardo, who had arrived quietly. "How life gives us chances to right our wrongs." That night, as veterinarians worked tirelessly to stabilize the new residents, the center's staff circulated among the kennels, ensuring each animal had fresh water and clean food. Rex followed them at a distance, a silent guardian on his own journey of redemption. A year had passed since the night Rex nearly lost his life at sea. The Canine Recovery Center, which began as a project of redemption, was now recognized as a benchmark in the treatment and rehabilitation of traumatized dogs. More than 50 animals had already passed through its doors, each with its own story of overcoming adversity. On one particularly memorable morning, Bruno was in his office, a space now vastly different from the luxurious environment he once frequented. The walls were decorated with photos of recovered dogs, each image telling a story of transformation. Next to his computer rested the old silk tie he had worn on the day of the trial, a constant reminder of the man he used to be. To his surprise, Diego entered the office accompanied by an elderly woman with tears welling in her eyes. "This is Donna Carla," Diego introduced. "She was the former owner of Luna, our very first rescue." Donna Carla stood to greet him, but surprised everyone with a tight embrace. "My boy," she said, her voice trembling. "I have no words to thank you for what you've done for Luna. After my husband passed away, I couldn't keep the farm anymore, and she suffered so much there." Luna, who had once been timid and frail, now sported a shiny coat and bright, lively eyes. Upon seeing Donna Carla, her ears perked up, and she trotted gracefully to the fence. "She's been a great teacher for the other dogs," Bruno explained, "especially for the older ones. She helps the newcomers adapt." Just then, Gabriel approached, carrying some training equipment. "Donna Carla, what a pleasure to meet you," he said. "I think it's time we showed you the work Luna has been doing with the children." "I never imagined," Donna Carla commented, watching as Gabriel prepared Luna for a demonstration. "When I was forced to sell the farm, I thought she would meet a sad end. But look at her. She's found an even greater purpose." Eduardo, who had arrived silently, joined the group. Bruno called to him. Tell Donna Carla about the new project. I'm going to teach everything I've learned about the emotional side of this work, Gabriel added with his humble smile. Although I think I've learned more from the dogs than I could ever teach. Bruno exchanged a meaningful glance with his father before replying, I'll be coordinating the awareness program, traveling the country to share our story, mine and Rex's, and to help prevent other dogs from suffering what he went through. And the recoveries are already happening, Diego added. Some of the animals are now ready for adoption by carefully selected families, of course. Donna Carla, watching Rex and Luna side by side, said softly, They say God draws straight with crooked lines. Looking at all this, at all the goodness that has sprung from such difficult times, I can't help but believe it. It was the second anniversary of the Rex Canine Recovery Center, and the grounds were decorated for a special celebration. Colorful banners fluttered in the gentle morning breeze, and the scent of fresh food filled the air. Dozens of people milled about, many of them families who had adopted dogs rehabilitated by the center. Bruno, now 23, seemed completely transformed from the arrogant young man he had been. His hands, once soft, now bore the calluses of honest work, and his eyes held the wisdom that only true change can bring. Gabriel, who had just arrived with his family, smiled that characteristic grin of his, as if to say, Sometimes we have to hit rock bottom to find the strength to climb up. Hey, buddy, Bruno whispered, wrapping an arm around Rex's neck. I needed to see you before we start. You know all of this is because of you, don't you? Father and son walked together to the main area, where a small crowd had already gathered. Among them were veterinarians, handlers, local farmers, and, to the surprise of many, some of Bruno's old acquaintances, not to mock, but to learn. Diego stepped onto the small stage to present the center's numbers: more than 200 dogs rescued, 80 registered adoptive families, and 30 graduates from the specialized handler program. Each statistic represented a transformed life, a true story of redemption. I want you to see something, Diego said, his voice thick with emotion. Something that Rex taught me. Something that changed my life forever. Look at them. Bruno continued. Each of these dogs arrived here broken, scared, and without trust in humans. Just like I was, disillusioned with myself. But Rex showed me that there's always room for forgiveness, for a new beginning, for love. You know what the most beautiful part is? Asked an old fisherman from the crowd. It's that now you are also a beacon of hope for others. Sometimes, Bruno confessed quietly, I wonder if he truly forgave me, or if he just understood that I needed a chance to be better. The celebration continued throughout the day, with therapy dog demonstrations and emotional recovery stories. But the most touching moment came when Rex, on his own initiative, approached a newly arrived dog who was watching everything, terrified, from its kennel. Bruno nodded, his heart overflowing with gratitude, and declared, This is what we'll keep doing. One day at a time, one dog at a time, one person at a time.